to be half-hearted anymore, but actually he or she can take advantage of the comfortable and peaceful situation to go deeper into the practice.
On this, I would say that to a certain extent it's true, but the person must have developed quite a long way in the Dhamma to be able to do that.
Must have developed a lot in the Dhamma to be able to take advantage of an easy situation.
Yes. It's rather on the lines of Tanachan's teaching about middle way. When one has a lot of kilesas.
When
one has a lot of kilesas.
Yes.
Then one has to use a lot of rough methods to correct them. When those methods have had their effect, then the kilesas are more subtle. Well, what's left is more subtle. You have to use more subtle ways of correcting them. As they get more and more subtle, the necessity for very rough and difficult environments gets less. With most people, but I mean, one can't be sure. There may be some people vary so much one can't tell. But this is probably the case. On the other hand, it will depend what one means by a suitable or an easy situation. I mean, if we've had an easy situation where there was food available, I mean, good food, but not necessarily too much. Where it was very quiet, peaceful, where you didn't have to bother about other things very much, and you could do them, just stay there and do the practice. Then that would be a good situation.
That's what I mean.
That sort of situation, yes. That can be.
It's good for a practitioner. Yes. For another person, would be a nightmare, probably.
Yes, maybe. Yes.
Because, on the other hand, if a situation is good in the sense that it's full of input, of distractions, then that would be challenging for meditators, wouldn't it? Because you should look that the mind doesn't get sucked in all those inputs.
Yes, although it doesn't usually help. Very, very few people does it help. It's nearly always harmful.
In other words, they better avoid such challenges.
Yeah. The challenge is like that. Well, there may be people who would then look on it as a challenge and would fight it, and it may help them. Because there are all sorts of people. But most people, it's harmful.
It's dangerous, right? Yeah. So better a more secluded...
I mean, to give an example, a person whose mind becomes more subtle, they become more sensitive. And they just have to hear a bit of music on the radio, not their own, I mean with another one sort of in another house perhaps. And that goes in, they have quite a while getting that out of it. It takes quite a while before that stops coming up in their mind.
Well, it's true. I've noticed that since
I mean, when you've got that sort of thing, it's a terrible nuisance.
But wouldn't you say this is, I think, an important point? Through the practice, one becomes more sensitive.
Yes.
But isn't it true that, in addition to becoming more sensitive, one somehow, I hope at least, becomes also stronger? Because I've noticed that myself, that I'm certainly more sensitive after years of practice that I was before, than I was before.
It's true, one becomes stronger. But the thing is, it's far better if one can use that strength to dealing with one's own problems than having to use it to deal with sort of things that are artificial or that come in from outside.
Yes, in other words, spending energy to protect oneself.
Yeah, it's increasing the task.
It's increasing the task, yes. Yes.
Generally, nearly all those who practice, they say, get to a quiet place. It's good. Noisy, disturbed places are very bad.
Yes. No, the only thing one can say is that unfortunately, unless you are a monk, not always you can choose a quiet place. So when you have to be in a noisy place, you need all your Dhamma to face it, don't you think? Like living in a city and having to deal with a lot of people, and then what I try to do is to remind myself of all the Dhamma that I learned.
Well, in a case like that, one can just sort of mark time and try and hold against it as much as one can. But as far as developing in that, it's difficult. Very difficult.
No, I see what you mean. I'm not implying that you go into a traffic jam in order to develop yourself or your samadhi, or you try to avoid traffic jams. But once you are there, I think it's important to take a very active Dhammic attitude rather than just pray that the situation ends as soon as possible, right?
Yes. No, I mean, obviously one must try and do what one can in that situation, whatever situation one's in. But it's better if one can avoid it.
Definitely. Yes. It's like, on the other hand, makes me think of illnesses.
Yes.
One has to, to do all the best to be as healthy as one can. But once the illness strikes, then it can be a powerful tool for our practice.
Yes. It's like that old jingle, what's it now? When he was sick, he was a monk as monk should be. But when he was ill, when he was well, a devil a monk was he.
Devil?
A devil a monk was he. So it's an old Christian saying. I don't know where it comes from.
The song imply that it's better if...
Well, I mean, when he was sick, he was very sorry for himself, and he sort of prayed and did all the things he should.
Right.
But once he got well, he was up to all sorts of tricks.
Yes. One last thing, if you don't mind, just briefly for today. The other day we talked a little bit about Satipanya. If you had to say just a few essential things about Satipanya and the four Satipatthanas, what would you say? Unless you think that it's better to postpone this question.
Well, the four Satipatthanas are really the field of Satipanya. The field is, because four Satipatthanas deal with body, feeling, chitta, dhammas.
Right.
And this is the field in which the Satipatthana, four Satipanya must be used. Satipanya is used in body, the first one, because it's the most gross, it's the most obvious. Some people find it valuable to use feeling as well, or to examine the chitta, its nature, or to go into dhammas.
When you say go into dhammas, you mean the five nivaranas and four noble truths?
Yes,
and the seven?
Say the dhammas mean the underlying principles. The underlying principles of what we are and what life is.
Oh, I see. So you don't mean it in necessarily in okay. I think we can talk about this.
If one looks at it carefully, one will find that the Four Noble Truths, all the different factors from that, the five khandhas, the 37, isn't it? Bodhipatya Dhammas.
Yes, they all are the underlying principles.
They are the underlying principles. And one can go into those, but they're very subtle, and the usual place to start is body, because that's pretty obvious. Also, it's said If one sees one of these things properly, one will see the others.
All of this.
If one sees one part of the body truly, the whole lot becomes apparent.
Yes.
You don't have to go through every part. One bit is enough.
Yeah, I think I'll ask some more next time, for the time being.
Right there.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Okay, today is January the 9th, and this is a conversation with Ajaan Panyavaddho. Talking about the very crucial issue of the kilesas. What would you say about sadness and kilesas? Would you say that sadness is a kilesa, or would you say that all forms of sadness are kilesa, or maybe some of them are, or some of them are not?
If one gets sad, it usually means that something has happened that is unpleasant, that one dislikes, one doesn't want. Now, this may be a good thing or a bad thing, but one doesn't want it. It has gone contrary to what one's used to. It's gone contrary to what one's accepted, and to one's plans, or one's outlook on the world, or on people, or whatever it happens to be. Now, to the extent that one's got a fixed idea, that comes from kilesas, of course. But one hasn't accepted change. I mean, it's said when the Buddha died that bhikkhus who had not attained arahantship were very sorry. Those who had, there's no sorrow. It was just accepted. Because of that, one can say, yes, there are kilesas there, to some extent. There must be kilesas involved in it. At the same time, one mustn't look on a state of sadness or sorrow as necessarily a bad thing. Because if the sorrow comes from such as one sees the body, and when one sees the body, one sees what it is. And one sees that it's contrary to what one's always accepting, contrary to one's fond illusions. So it isn't the high and important thing one's made it out to be in the past. Then a state of sorrow can come up, a state of disillusionment.
You mean seeing that the body decays?
Seeing it like that, yes, yes. But this sorrow comes up because it's the dukkha of having to give way to the truth. And the self, which involves kilesas, of course, is then frustrated and it's diminished. So there's a feeling of dukkha, which we interpret as sorrow. To that extent, one can say kilesas are definitely involved, but the state itself isn't necessarily a bad state. It may be just an inevitable result of something that is quite good that's happened or happening.
And therefore you would not deal with it the same way you would deal with anger, for instance.
Yes. If, however, the sorrow goes to a state where one's incapacitated, then you can say there's kilesas there.
If the state of sorrow makes one sort of incapacitated, where you can't do anything, where the person can't think of anything else, then they've gone too far, and that's kilesas going on. It's there, I would say, there's an attempt to try and recoup the situation and not to accept it. Recoup? What do you mean by recoup?
To recoup self, to get back to self as it was before.
I see. No, in other
Instead
words,
of giving way,
in other words,
realizing that this is gone. We can't cling on it.
the situation that you described, the total paralysis, would be due to the fact that there is total non-acceptance of something.
Yes.
So you are closing up
Yes.
and trying to
Try to hold on.
to hold on and have things stay the same,
Yes.
totally unrealistically.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't know the cause of the wave of sadness.
Yeah.
Would you say that the only thing, or the one thing which counts in terms of right practice, right effort, is not feeding it, not
Yeah, when it comes, the best thing to do is to accept it as dukkha. And to realize that this dukkha has come about because one's had wrong understanding, wrong views. It's because of the fundamental wrong views and outlook that one's had in the past this has come about at all, this sadness.
Mm-hmm.
If that hadn't been there, it couldn't come.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a reflection which helps. And then in terms of practicing, of course, being with the parikamma helps, not to feed the mood.
Yes, it's really what's required there is a state of acceptance, which means that when it arises, one knows it's arisen, one accepts it, and one goes on doing what has to be done in the world, just as one normally does, regardless. In other words, one takes no account of that sadness, insofar as it may try to inhibit one from doing things.
Yes. Well,
one just goes ahead and does whatever it needs doing, and that's it. And one says, all right, well, this is anicca also.
Yes, so suppose you are in a retreat, you go ahead and meditate.
Yes, you go on, yes.
And stick to your parikamma, for instance.
Yes, yes.
This seems to be the best policy, maybe.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, in this regard, there are a couple of things by Kanachan. To me, there are statements which seem crucial to me. It says, our investigation of pain is for the purpose of separating the mind from the pain, so that if not entangled in pain, so that it is not entangled in pain, so that whenever pain arises, the mind doesn't cling to the pain as being itself. And somewhere else, it's he says the citta is not dukkha, which seems to be a condensed statement to the same effect.
Yes. Mind here, of course, means citta.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that the citta itself is not the pain, it's not the dukkha. The dukkha, the pain, is a parameter, if you like. It's a factor that arises and it dies away. Because it arises and dies away, it's not the citta. It's separate. And one has to examine. Normally we think there is dukkha, I have dukkha. In fact, we normally say I am dukkha at times. Now, what we have dukkha as one thing, we have the I or self as we think is another, the two are identified. All we have to try and do is separate them, see, compare the dukkha, we can compare what I believe to be myself. And see, well, this that I think of as myself, and this dukkha, in what way are they identified?
What I think to be myself and dukkha.
Yes. To see whether that self that one thinks, which is identified with the dukkha, is the real thing or not.
maybe one doesn't find anything.
Possibly not, but one has to try to search to find out, well, all right, if this dukkha is here, who has the dukkha? What has the dukkha? What knows this dukkha? What is affected by it?
For instance, what knows the dukkha seems to be the citta, and the citta keeps knowing it, so it doesn't seem to be it, right?
It knows it, but it isn't. It shouldn't be affected by it. The ephemeral citta, the citta as khandhas, of course, is affected by it. But that's the on that similar idea. That's the waves on the ocean, which can be of all sorts of shapes and forms.
Right.
But the real nature of the citta, one has to look at and see, well, this that is underlying all the time.
The citta.
Yeah, the citta here. Well, this and this dukkha, in what way are they the same?
No, it seems to me that they're not the same, because dukkha comes and goes, and the faculty of knowing is constantly there.
Yes.
But I feel that if I think in this case of citta in terms of awareness, that facilitates my practice. I can see the difference between a vedana, dukkha, which a painful sensation which comes and goes, and the awareness which is there, and which seems to be different from it.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good thing to keep on to that, to see that difference between the two. It's important.
Yes, because otherwise citta, I might fall into the trap of using citta as a concept, as an idea. But citta is the knowing, isn't it?
It's the one who knows.
Constantly.
Yeah.
So awareness is citta.
Yeah. It's like somebody asked, someone was talking about the citta one night to Ajaan, the layperson. And he wants to know what the citta was. So Ajaan took his flashlight and he was shone it and he when you see something of that sort, that light there, he said, that's not the citta.
He pointed to something.
Well, he was saying this person was talking about the citta as though it was a light or something that's like that. And he said, that's not the citta. He said, he shone his flashlight and he said, that's not the citta, this is the citta.
What is shown is not...
It's the one that it comes from,
right.
In that case. And no one can say, the one who knows is the citta. The one who sees, the one who hears. Not what is heard. Not the reaction that comes to it either.
No.
The one who just knows it, and he just knows. It's not knowing of anything. It's not the hearing of any sound. It's not the seeing of any object. It's the hearing of just sound. It's the hearing and seeing of just colour. And the objects come about through comparison with memory in a little later stage. I mean, it's very fast, it is still a later stage. Comparison with memory, and then the identification, rightly or wrongly, is presented to the citta as being this.
Yes.
But the knowing, first knowing that's there, that is just the citta, nothing else. And it's an undefinable knowing. One can't even know it at that stage as seeing or hearing or smelling or tasting or touching. It's just a sensation. That's all.
Now, in terms of the investigation, Satipanya, it seems to me that the investigation of pain is crucial, whether be it physical pain or mental pain. One key approach, it seems to me from what you said, is asking who is suffering or who is knowing the suffering. The task is separating the disidentifying, separating the painful sensation from myself.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Very important, yes. But one has to realize also that in order for one to be able to do that, the chitta must drop into a state of panyā. In the ordinary consciousness, it can't do that. And to get into that state of panyā, one can do it by the investigation. One goes on and on and on to plugging it, and it can break through. Or it can do it by developing the samadhi. There's another way around. Another direction.
You develop the samadhi independent from the pain that you're having.
Yes, if by one's practice of samadhi one has developed it so that one can go into samadhi with a fair facility, then one can go into it with that problem of the pain coming up, and I can see quite quickly what the nature of it is.
No, ordinary consciousness doesn't seem to bother. It's passive if a pain is there. I don't know whether I can drop in a state of panya very easily. I know that perhaps I can do the necessary preparation. Wouldn't you say that asking repeatedly, who's having the pain, where is the pain, is a way of preparing?
Yes,
panya?
it might, yes. It might even break through it. Depends on how thick the barriers are. But Ajaan has said that the chitta is like something very bright and very clear, wrapped up by a lot of messy paper and all sorts of stuff. And because of that you can't see it, you can't get it. And it's rather like this, when we can't get at the chitta, we can't see the nature of things like pain and these sensations. We can't get the real nature. We can't see the difference between them and self. And what's necessary is to penetrate through.
In other words, yes, ways of not going away from the pain. I first of all, I think I need ways. I need to develop ways of sticking to the pain. Otherwise, how can I?
The key to that is sati.
The key is sati. Yes. Otherwise, I drop away. I let it drop. I let it drop away. Whereas if I stick to it, at least I have a chance, right? I have no guarantee that I fall into the panya state, but at least I have the necessary prerequisite if I stick to the pain, if I stick to the true sati.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So sati helps me stick to it, and then panya. My understanding is that some is in my power, is in my hands, and some is not.
Yes.
Is that right? Is that correct? There is something I can do in terms of panya, something which has to happen. I can't do it.
There's three things you can do really. The first thing is to put forward effort. Second thing is to keep one's attention on it. And the third thing is to investigate. And if one keeps on doing those with enough strength, then it will break through. And the panya will rise.
Right. And when you say investigate, I remember what you were saying the other day. It's just this, in some way even creative, putting oneself on different angles,
that's right,
asking different questions, and besieging, so to speak, the pain or whatever it is that is being investigated.
Yes, constantly sort of attacking it from every angle like this, and going on and on and on with that until eventually sort of something comes and breaks out and gets you.
But pain doesn't seem to be the only object of investigation, although a very prominent one.
Yes, many. Yes.
Because it's the first of
in
the
fact,
fruits.
it comes under the heading of the four satipatthana. Kaya, Vedana, Chitta, Dhamma.
Yes.
Four. Now, the first is body, which includes the body as it is, all its parts, body as dead body or decaying body, seeing loathsomeness, seeing it as the elements. I don't know if there are any other ways of seeing it, but I mean it's in all those ways there. And one can use any of these methods to see the body.
Yes.
Feeling. Which would be way denied, be the pain, the other kind.
Yes. And in case one wants to investigate body, I don't mean bodily pain, I mean body.
Yeah.
What would be a basic training, like the 5 parts? Or?
They are the basic parikamma, yes. All the monks are given those at the ordination ceremony. They are important. And the method is again really looking at it, thinking about it, turning it over, trying to see what its real nature is. For example, if one's walking, you can look at the body and look at the process of that, and think about it, moving it. And one can ask oneself, does this body know anything? Is this body able to decide anything? I have to answer it doesn't. It doesn't know anything. Just like a wood or a machine or that.
In this case, you are investigating the body in its entirety,
or any way one likes, doesn't matter. You can take the parts if you like. And you can say, with skin, does the skin know anything? What is it? Is there something that's really me? I mean, what is this? I mean, just cut off here. This wouldn't immediately change. And yet how could I call it mine then? Things like that. Trying to sort of break through and get the wisdom in that.
Or you can also select one part of the body, like a leg or hand. Or
yes. Whatever suits. Yes.
Again, it seems that one key question always has to do with me and myself, me and mine, I and mine.
Yes. Because we identify with them.
Very much.
And this identification is obviously a bad thing, because it brings us much dukkha. And that's the aim of Buddhism, is the eradicating of dukkha. So the identification with body is contrary to the way of thinking.
Right.
And it's a false identification too. So, to the extent that the person can get free from the body, realizing it's not me, it's not mine, it's just part of this world, to that extent they lose the fear of death and the fear of injury to the body, the fear of harm to it. I mean, I may still be afraid of pain, but the actual idea of loss where the body is concerned is minimized. So it's obviously a great gain.
Of losing the body, of losing myself.
Or part of the body even. So to that extent it's bound to be a gain to it.
So finding ways of disidentifying oneself from the body. One of these ways can be the Asubha meditations. But you said that some people...
Karagatasati or Asubha.
But some people are resistant to the Asubha, right?
Oh, very resistant, yes. I mean, people will think for hours about the Absolute, which they don't know anything about at all. The body, which they do know a lot about, they won't like to think about. Except in the wrong way.
Yeah, on the other hand, it's also, I remember reading Tanachan Mahabhuva, unattractiveness is a concept, useful one, but it's a concept, same as attractiveness, and the mind should go beyond both attractiveness and unattractiveness.
But in this case, the middle way is the balancing of the identification with body, balancing that against the Asubha practice, to bring the chitta in the middle way, which is seeing the truth. In other words, to see that the body is just part of this world. I mean, finally, it's no longer attractive or unattractive, like an old bit of wood. It's just that.
You said something more specific. Balancing
Yeah,
against, say,
balancing the attachment of the body, or the attraction to the body, against the asubha practice or the kayagata sati practice, because that's tending to go see the loathsomeness of the body rather than the attractiveness of it. So when one balances those two, then one comes to the centre and sees the truth.
Oh, I see what you mean. The middle way is not identifying with the attractiveness, neither with the attractiveness nor with the unattractiveness.
But to do that, you've got to go in the opposite to what one's natural inclination. One's natural inclination is to identify with the body.
Is cherish the body,
and to cherish it and think it's beautiful or whatever it happens to be. So one has to go in the opposite direction to balance that out.
And this would be the useful side of the asubha meditation.
Yes.
So you see the unattractive side of the body.
One of the difficult things to realize, though, is how strong that attraction to the body is. A person can only realize that when they start doing the practice, they try to see the body as being a super. They realize how strong it is, and how from that practice one can get up often states of depression coming up, because the chitta is being forced, or the self is being forced to see the unattractiveness. And this can, so a person doing that practice really needs to have some other practice as well to keep the chitta calm, like the anapana, calm down.
I guess also a fairly stable emotional quality.
Yes, if the person's fairly emotionally stable, it's all right. Somebody who's not emotionally stable might be in difficulty
with this kind of practice.
It could be.
Now, whenever, this is Tanachan again, an event, whether good or bad, makes contact with the mind, mindfulness and discernment, Satipanya, should take it up immediately. Any event. Now, we were talking about using the body to develop Panya. But would you say that the body, in certain respects, is easier than other subjects, other objects? Sorry.
In general, I would say yes, it is, because it's more gross. After all, we have a fair idea of what it is. Whereas if we come to feelings and the chitta, they're much more nebulous. Dhamma is even more so. So the advantage of the body is, well, yes, we've got a fair idea about this body. It may not be absolutely right, but still we start off with knowing quite a lot about it. And because of that, it is easy to
Well, once we work enough with the body in our practice, then it is easier, I gather, to jump at any event, as Tanachan is pointing out. Event is anything.
Yes, although that is more general, what's there. As far as the body practice is concerned, they say that one who practices the body and is mindful of the body and knows the body, they never forget the body. And they never forget themselves, in whatever circumstances they are. Which means that they would have, they would keep their knowledge of themselves actively there. Whereas most people don't. They forget themselves and their minds wander off all over the place. And you only need to look at a group of people in a cocktail party. How many of them are there? They're thinking, talking about something else, miles all over the place. And forget their existence.
So you're saying that if one is grounded in the body, then this jumping, so to speak, at any event is easier.
It becomes much more clear when that happens. It becomes very clear, and then one starts seeing how much everybody else is doing, because you can see it now.
Sorry, could you
You come to see how everybody else is doing.
how little?
How much they're jumping about.
Mhm.
How much they don't keep in the body. How much their minds are all over the place.
Yes, but I said jumping at any event in a positive sense. Whenever an event makes contact with the mind, mindfulness should take it up immediately.
Oh yes,
I was
yes,
meaning
yeah,
in this.
yeah.
In
Oh
this.
yes, yes, yeah.
This is positive,
Yes.
in a positive way.
With that, the thing is, I'm not sure what the context of that is, but if it was in terms of body contemplation, it would probably mean that the mind is present here in the body. It keeps to the body due to the practice of that. Being present in the body, it becomes aware of what's going on around it very easily,
It becomes aware.
of what's happening locally around the world. And it keeps to that. Therefore, it can very easily become aware when anything happens, whatever it is.
Which means that mental events are more easily graspable if you are grounded in the body.
Yes, yes.
So you don't get sucked in Vedanas, or you are not forgetful.
Yes, yes.
So basically, you have much more satipani.
It helps sati enormously. And it puts what I would call a different philosophy on life, different outlook on life. I mean, for example, one thinks you hear about an accident and 200 people have been killed or something of that sort. Now one thinks, well, these are just bodies. And if we work out just plainly by statistics, the average number of people dying per day is about 200,000 in the world. So we think, well, if 200 people die there, really compared with the world, it isn't very much. It's just normal. I mean, I don't mean that we want accidents, but at the same time, one has to put in the picture, see it in perspective, and realise these are bodies as they're dying. And they're not people. They're what we colloquially call people. But the idea of there being a person there isn't really true.
Where is
In
the
other words,
person?
what we think of people, the way we think of people as people, is the wrong idea.
Oh, I see. In other words, we identify people with their bodies.
Yes.
And whereas you are saying a jump in or a change in philosophy.
Yeah. Completely new idea comes up. Because if you think, how do we identify people? By bodily intimation, which means the movement of the body, and by speech. There's little else we know, really. So that is our identification. We identify people then by what we've seen and heard. And what else we build up is really in ourselves. We build up the image in ourselves.
Of that person.
Yeah.
Mm.